The kettle was still boiling when Mum reached for my hand instead of the envelope I'd carried for 9 years. "Sit down first, love," she said, and her voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before. Not once. Not even at my grandmother's funeral. Not even the year Dad was signed off work with his back, and we didn't know if the money would stretch. I'd driven up from Sheffield that morning with the discharge letter zipped inside my coat pocket, the lining coming away at a seam I'd meant to mend for 2 winters running. 9 years of night shift payroll work for a haulage firm. 9 years of a standing order that quietly emptied my account on the 14th of every month, long before I could talk myself out of it. Holidays I didn't take. A car I kept patching up instead of replacing. All of it folded into one sheet of paper sitting against my ribs. Mum and Dad's mortgage, paid off in full, timed to land on their kitchen table on their 40th anniversary. I'd rehearsed this moment for weeks, not this version of it. Mum wasn't looking at the envelope at all. She was looking down at her own hands, smoothing the same square of tablecloth over and over, the way she does when she's trying to iron the fear out of something with her fingers instead of her voice. I'd seen her do it during Dad's redundancy scare. I'd seen her do it the week before my wedding, when she thought the caterer had cancelled. I had never seen her do it in her own kitchen, on an ordinary Tuesday, with her own daughter sitting across from her. Dad hadn't said a single word since I'd walked through the door. He sat by the window in his usual chair, but his eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on the biscuit tin on the sideboard, the one marked house in Mum's careful handwriting, where she'd kept every mortgage statement since 1989. He was looking at it the way you look at something that no longer belongs to you. "Before you give us that," Mum said finally, nodding at the shape in my coat pocket like it might bite her. "There's something about the house you need to know first. Something your brother's done." I asked her what she meant. My voice came out steadier than I felt. She didn't answer straight away. She took a breath, the kind that costs something. "Connor's name is on the deeds," she said. "Has been since March." The words didn't fit anywhere in my head. I sat there holding a piece of paper that was suddenly worth nothing, the wax-sealed discharge letter I'd been so proud of a moment ago, and all I could manage was, "Since March, 6 months. You've known for 6 months." Mum's hand went still on the tablecloth for the first time. "We didn't want to worry you before the anniversary." Worry me. I heard my own voice go somewhere I didn't recognize. "Mum, I've been paying into this for 9 years thinking it was going to be yours." Dad finally spoke, quiet and rough. "It wasn't meant to feel like this, Neve." He said my name like an apology. "Connor and Fiona came to us in the spring. Said with care, home costs the way they are now, we should think about protecting the house early. Put it in someone's name while we're still capable of deciding. They said it was just paperwork, just precaution." "And you believed that Connor's name specifically had to be the one on it?" Neither of them answered that. I knew the pattern before I let myself admit it. Fiona had always talked in that particular voice about families who plan properly and families who leave things too late. The same voice she'd used the Christmas she suggested Mum and Dad move into their granny annex instead of rattling around in a 3-bedroom house alone. Connor had never once mentioned any of it to me. Not at Sunday dinner, not on the phone. 6 months, and not a single word. I got up and went to the sideboard before I'd decided to, lifting the lid off the house tin the way I had 100 times as a child looking for stamps. Underneath the mortgage statements was a solicitor's letter I didn't recognize, addressed to Dad alone, dated the 2nd week of June, 3 months after the transfer, not before it. "Dad," I held it up. "This is after, what is this?" He looked at it for a long moment, and sometime, hing in his face wasn't shame anymore. It was closer to relief. "That," he said, "is the bit your brother doesn't know about yet." Dad set his tea down without drinking it, and told me the rest in the plain, unhurried way he tells stories about the yard at the shipping depot, like if he said it steadily enough, it wouldn't be able to hurt anyone. After Connor and Fiona left that day in March with the transfer signed, something about it had sat wrong with him. Not the idea of protecting the house, the speed of it. Fiona had brought the solicitor herself, a family friend of hers, not the one Mum and Dad had used for 40 years. Dad said he'd signed because Fiona kept saying, just to be safe before anything happens to either of you, and because arguing with Fiona in his own front room had never once ended well for anyone. But in May, at his own GP surgery, waiting for a hearing test, he'd got talking to a bloke he used to work with whose mother had been moved into a care home the year before, and everything the man described about protecting assets sounded nothing like what had happened to their house. So Dad had gone quietly to Alan Beckett, the solicitor who'd handled their wills for 2 decades, and asked him to look at what he'd signed. Alan told me the transfer was legal, Dad said, but there was nothing stopping me undoing it. It was our house. Connor never paid a penny for it, never lived here, never even asked before Fiona brought the papers round. He'd signed a second deed in June, transferring it back into his and Mum's names jointly, with a clause Alan added, that any future change to ownership needed both their signatures and independent legal advice, witnessed outside the family solicitor Fiona had chosen. You didn't tell Connor, I said. I didn't know how to, without it turning into a war before your anniversary gift even landed on the table. I thought about ringing Connor there and then. I didn't. Some part of me still wanted to hear it from him directly, wanted Evet. And now to believe there was an explanation that didn't involve Fiona convincing my parents to hand away the one thing they'd worked 40 years for. Sunday lunch, Mum said quietly. They're coming Sunday. You could ask him then. I looked at the solicitor's letter still sitting between us on the tablecloth, and for the first time all afternoon, I didn't feel like the person holding the wrong piece of paper. Sunday came grey and ordinary, rain streaking the kitchen window, while Mum laid out the good plates like nothing was different, the ones with the gold rim she only brings down for Christmas and birthdays, wiped free of a dust that couldn't possibly have settled since Tuesday. I understood, watching her line up the cutlery twice, that this was armour. If the table looked right, maybe the afternoon would behave itself. Connor arrived first, shaking rain off his coat in the porch, talking before he was even properly through the door about roadworks on the A61 and a diversion that had cost him 20 minutes. Fiona came in behind him, unwinding a scarf slowly, her eyes moving around the kitchen the way they always do, over the worktops, the notice board, the calendar with Mum's dentist appointment circled in red. Cataloguing, Dean used to call it, though Dean wasn't Fiona's husband. Connor was. Dean was just the only one of us who'd ever said it out loud. Something smells good, Fiona said, hanging her scarf on the wrong hook, the one that's technically Dad's. I said something back. I don't remember what. I was watching Connor take his usual chair, the one nearest the window, and thinking about how many Sundays I'd sat across this same table without once asking him a direct question about anything that mattered. We got as far as the roast being carved before I did it. Dad had barely set the serving spoon down when I slid the June letter out from under my placemat and put it on the table, next to the carving knife, angled so Connor would see it before Fiona did. He stopped mid-sentence, fork halfway to a potato. What's that? Dad's solicitor's letter, from June. I kept my voice level, the tone I use when a delivery's gone wrong and getting upset about it won't make the parcel arrive any faster. You should probably read it before Fiona does the talking for you. Fiona's own fork went still against her plate. Neve, whatever this is about, I think we should... I know about March, I said. And I kept it aimed at Connor, not her, because it was Connor's understanding of his own life I actually cared about. I know your name went onto the deeds while I was still paying off a mortgage I genuinely thought would end up being Mum and Dad's. Outright, no one else's name anywhere near it. What I want to know now is whether you knew that. Or whether it got arranged around you the same way it got arranged around me. He picked the letter up, read it once quickly, the way you read something you're hoping will turn out to say something different the second time. Read it again, slower. Something moved in his jaw that I recognized from when we were 9 and 11, the exact look he used to get when he'd been caught in a lie he hadn't fully admitted to himself yet. Fiona said it was a formality, he said, for inheritance tax planning. You said, and here he finally looked at her, properly, the way you look at someone across a much larger distance than a kitchen table. You said Mum and Dad asked for it themselves. I said it would be sensible. Fiona's voice had gone very careful, very measured, the tone she uses at her own dinner parties when a joke's landed wrong. There's a difference. That is not what you told me, Fiona. You told me they'd asked. Nobody rushed to fill the silence after that. Rain kept going against the window. Mum's hand had found the tablecloth again, though this time she wasn't smoothing it. She was gripping a fold of it, still, waiting. Dad spoke last, and steadier than I'd heard him all week. Nobody asked for anything, Connor. Fiona brought a solicitor into my front room in March, a man I'd never met before that morning, and I signed because I trusted her to have my interests at heart, same as I trust you two. I've since had it corrected, properly, with Alan. Both our names on it now, jointly, and nothing about that house changes again unless your mother and I both take independent advice first. Nobody else's solicitor, nobody else's suggestion. Nobody argued with that. There genuinely wasn't anywhere left for an argument to go. The paperwork said what it said, and Fiona knew better than any of us exactly how binding paperwork is. She left the table about 20 minutes later, said something about a headache, gathered her scarf from the wrong hook without seeming to notice it was wrong. Connor didn't follow her out straight away. He stayed, oddly, properly stayed, clearing plates alongside Mum instead of hovering by the door checking his phone the way he usually does by 4:30 on a Sunday. On the doorstep afterwards, coat half on, he told me he was going to see Alan Beckett himself, on his own, without Fiona sitting in on it this time. I don't know yet what that conversation will do to his marriage, and it isn't mine to manage or predict. What was mine that evening was the discharge letter, finally handed over the way I'd planned it 9 years ago, minus the string lights, minus the photo collage, minus any performance at all. Just Mum at the kitchen table with her glasses pushed up her nose, reading it twice the way Connor had read the other letter, and Dad's hand resting quiet on the biscuit tin instead of gripping it the way it had that morning. Mum slid the letter inside the tin herself, laying it flat on top of 35 years of statements exactly where it belonged. That's the last one goes in there, she said, closing the lid. I think for the first time since March, she actually believed it.